Special Operations, Covert Ops, Espionage, The Team House, with your hosts, Jack Murphy and David Park.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 174 of The Team House. A little off-kilter Tuesday episode. Of course, we'll be back on Friday, but tonight we're here with our guest, Andrew Milburn. He's here for, I believe, the third episode,
Indeed,
your third appearance on The Team House. We really appreciate it, man. You're kind of bouncing in between here and Europe. You've been really, since the last, I was remarking before we started, your last appearance on the show, like 6 months ago or whatever it was, me and you were like joking, like, oh, Russia would never invade Ukraine. That would never happen. Well, yeah, we were pretty wrong on that one. And you got directly involved, went over there and started the Mozart group. And I mean, before we'll get like pretty in depth, but I mean, do you want to just start right off the bat telling people what the Mozart group is and what you're doing over there?
Absolutely. And by the way, very fond memories of that last episode. I've tried to have it removed from the internet. Turns out you cannot do that.
No.
I know, it's just firmly embedded.
The internet is permanent.
And I said maybe the last half an hour, but no. Yeah. But there you go. Anyway, good. Thank you for that.
We contacted the chief of the internet for you, and he said no.
The internet police?
Yeah. But anyway, I've been eclipsed by then by other equally drunken behavior on your episode that encourages drunken behavior.
That and the press calling you a mercenary occasionally.
Exactly, I know. And not just the press, but the Atlantic. No, I mean, serious, Jack, that is pretty egregious.
The establishment.
Well,
the Anglo-American establishment.
It's not so much the establishment. It's the fact that the Atlantic, New York Times, you can say what you will about their politics or their slant, but they make a thing that's justified about checking and fact-checking and double-checking. And they've been, and the Washington Post, by the way, too, have been pretty good about firing people when, it turns out that there's been things that are unethical, right? Or it's just negligent. So it's disappointed that I know I'm answering your question, but I'm disappointed that the Atlantic, Graham Wood, who is supposed to be a renowned, credible journalist, wrote an article calling me a foreign fighter, which was absolutely inaccurate.
You and Malcolm Nance, he lumped you guys together, said you were mercenaries, right?
Yeah, was it Malcolm Nance? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
sorry
there
about
you go.
that.
Yeah. No, I mean, no.
Well,
I'm delighted to be lumped up with Malcolm. I wish I had his following, but I don't. So yeah, essentially mercenaries, which is
mad dog killers.
So sorry, getting back to your point. So Jack, we convened here last time in January. We became unutterably drunk. We lost you when you made a bathroom break. And unfortunately, the only thing people remember was when we were comparing tattoos at the end and I took off my shirt. I asked you to remove that. My lawyers contacted you. Unfortunately, you figured out that I can't afford lawyers, so that came out. Yeah.
Actually, we received very sizable donations to keep the episode up. Apparently, there are a number of people out there that enjoy the eye candy quite a bit.
Release the Murphy cut.
Yeah, of the Murphy cut, yeah. Okay. All right. So anyway, but the one thing I love about your show, it's modulated. So intellectually,
not moderated,
modulated intellectually, it goes very rapidly up and down. Jack. So soon after we had that episode, that sounds strange.
World War III pops off.
Sure enough, the Russians invade Kiev, and I, like probably many others, thought it was foregone conclusion that Ukraine would fall, blah, blah, blah. I would go out there. I write my 4 obligatory articles for Task and Purpose, and I want to issue an official apology to the then editor Paul Sroda, to whom I was very rude, because I got a form letter from Task and Purpose saying, since you are now
A mercenary.
Mercenary. It used terms along those lines, yeah. I don't think it says
Soldier
since
of
you're like,
fortune.
yeah, soldier
Yeah.
of fortune,
Yeah.
killer for hire.
Yeah.
We cannot ethically be associated with you anymore. And poor Paul, I was upset with him because I felt I'm so naive and emotional, Hey, you shouldn't have written me a form letter. You should have called me. But Paul's a great human being, good journalist, and he brought me out there. Anyway, fast forward, right? So we're in Kiev, and if you remember at the time, this was early March, and the Russians, no kidding, are on 3 sides of Kiev. It's so hard to imagine now. It seems surreal. But in Kiev itself, 20% of the population was left behind, and everyone was preparing to defend the city. And so, you read about, and it was true in the West media, that Zelensky said, everyone who wants an AK-47, come and draw one. If you're between the age of 1865, they're handing out all these weapons to guys who never handled a weapon before, right? Ammo, grenades. I'm not kidding you. It was surreal. And then some of the military guys there in Kiev, middle-ranking, most soft guys, there's 3 or 4 guys, said, okay, we got to train, even if it's 3 or 4 days, because the Russians are approaching, they're on a time, it was a very tight time schedule, but we got to give them some training, right? And that's where they reached out to me, and I brought in short order, like 2 or 3 other guys, former Marines, MARSOC guys from the States. We had a handful of guys in Ukraine, foreigners volunteering to help. We had very little time to kind of vet them. We didn't really vet them to begin with. We were lucky. We got some very good quality guys.
You vet the guys who were doing the training, or the soldiers?
Yeah.
That's a crapshoot, isn't it?
We had no time for leahy vetting of the dudes who were about to fight the Russians. So we broke them up into 120-man increments, 5 days training. We'd finish training, and they would jump in their cars, and they'd drive to the front. I'm not exaggerating, Irpin and Bucha. And then, they would come back a few days later for refresher training. We'd pull them into classes to talk about what they'd learned in that time. And you got incredible stories from these guys, and there was no bravado. These were guys who'd been mostly students, and now they're like
shell-shocked.
Yeah, and they're like, holy shit. Yeah, you've got to get very close to the Russians. Remember the Vietnamese, you say, they like hold on, get in, hold close, and then
classic,
they can't.
Classic guerrilla tactic.
Yeah,
like you're getting close.
And so the Ukrainians learn this too. You got to get in. Once you get in close with their infantry, they're shit. But if you're in range with their mortars or their artillery, they're really fucking good, and it's devastating. You just gotta you got to get in there. And there's one kid. He's like, I never worked out how to shoot the AK-47. It's very confusing to me. So my lieutenant goes, here's a bag of grenades. Just, you work it like that. You pull the pin and just throw the grenade. And he's like,
but stand over there when you do it.
He was like, and it was so awesome. These things are easy. I mean, I swear to God, these are real conversations. And he's like, I can be the grenade thrower forever. And we're like, no, well, dude, hopefully the Russians aren't always going to be that close.
Right, right. So did you finally get him sorted on the AK?
Yeah. A lot of these guys have carried weapons. Very few of them have fired them, and the weapons manipulation is horrific. And so, fast forward, that was the Battle of Kiev. And I'm not saying we had an influence on the Battle of Kiev, but we did our best, and we probably saved lives, Ukrainian lives, and hopefully contributed to Russian deaths. But it was, it's a short order process, and it was, you couldn't make this shut up. I mean, we would go to a range because you have to. I suppose it's some kind of a Marine Corps ethos, right? Because I know Army basic, they don't shoot their weapons. Basic. What? Come on, man!
Milburn,
don't get defensive.
You come all this way to
all
talk
right,
shit.
No. Anyway, I'm totally conflating things. When I'm talking about special operations components, the Marine special operations, MARSOC is the only component that during their selection, you're rated on marksmanship. Okay, listen, we can give the Marines one thing here, right, David? That is a religious observance of of marksmanship, right?
Oh, there are many rifles.
yeah.
This is my rifle. There are many.
Yeah.
It's
It's
and every that's the Marine Corps. Every
Yeah.
Marine is a rifleman, and you spend your entire boot camp snapping in.
Yeah.
And
But what
yeah.
comes with that is a genuine feeling
right.
among the cooks, bakers, and candlestick makers that they are riflemen because
Right.
at least once a year they go and, infantrymen can disparage that, but bottom line is every Marine knows how to shoot.
Right.
Right? So that's kind of the ethos because along with that comes confidence and everything else. you
Right.
know. So 5 days, what do? Well, they've got to be medically proficient in the sense they've got to know how to bring themselves back as best they can, and their buddy back from, from the edge, and stabilize them long enough to get them to the CCP. They've got to know how to shoot, how to hit the target. If they don't have a weapon that's zeroed, they may as well not carry the fucking weapon. I mean, it's
Right.
this is all stuff we know, but we're learning.
So for
They have to know how to move. But what's the biggest threat? 99% of their casualties come from Russian artillery. So we're teaching them how to provide overhead cover, how to dig a decent trench. Yes, this is perhaps passive stuff, but it keeps them alive.
Right.
And that is our biggest threat.
right. What did that training look like? So if they all drew out AKs, everybody got an AK. Did they get the ammunition to go for trauma training? Did you have goat labs? Did you just use moulage?
No. They had some ammo, very little. What we required was 120 rounds to train with. We got that always at least 120 rounds. For medical training, no. At that time, they didn't. They were short on everything. They were buying their own equipment for IFACs. They had no, what we call, squad. Yeah, I mean, you're a medic.
Like a medic or a corpsman or whatever?
The squad medic trauma kit.
Okay, yeah.
Right?
Okay.
They still are short on those, by the way. But they were very short. Back then, they had shitty, the tourniquets that they were issued were shitty. They were Chinese made, and the window broke every time and they didn't have enough of them. Blah 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 blah. No medical training. I mean, it was a recipe for disaster. Is no other way of putting it. But they pulled it off, and they pulled it off in fairness because they had just an indomitable determination that the Russians were not going to, capture the capital. They knew the terrain. They had a lot of things on their side, right? And in fairness, the bar was pretty low on the Russian side, although not all Russian soldiers are shite. There's a lot of the Ukrainian soldiers we work with tell a lot of stories about Russian infantrymen who they come across who are very good. Mm-hmm. They may, whether they're called special forces or what, but very good snipers. They're encountering guys who are have been captured, but very good at resisting interrogation. The Russians, the infantry is not their strong point. Russian army is derelict, yes, but Russian military capability is still pretty significant. That's one thing that a lot of the think tanks are losing in the mix. It's like, it's binary, right? Russians are awesome, they're really scary. Oh shit, no, now they're really fucking unscary. But it's somewhere in between.
Right.
Yeah, the infantry man to man
Right.
are generally not good, but their artillery is really fucking good. I mean,
What,
however you look at it.
How would so you get all these, kids and civilians. You have 3 days when
5.
or 5 days.
Yeah,
when they go to the front or when they go to meet the Russians, do they filter in? Do they get regular army elements to lead them? Are they just making it up as they go along? How did that work?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It gets back to the debate in the Second World War, right? Between how casualties should be fed back into, or casualty replacements fed back into the front line. And the Germans did it very well. I'm getting to a point here. So the Germans pulled back units and replenished those units with a cadre of the veterans. And they bring in, new guys as a cohort.
Yeah.
But they would learn from the veterans, and then they would go back as a unit. Whereas the Brits and the Americans, the Americans called the Repel Depel, right? So they would they would feed onesies and twosies. A platoon would lose 2 or 3 guys, and 2 or 3 days later, they'd get the 2 or 3 guy replacements. But they were FNGs, right? There was no sense, unless those guys survived beyond a certain point, there was no sense of loyalty towards them within the unit. Whereas if you do replacement, if you do unit replacement, then you tell the cadre of guys, survivors, this is your responsibility. The unit depends or dies based on your actions, and they take it upon themselves. So that is what the Ukrainians are doing. And it is proving very effective. So you see units that are taking 70, 80% casualties, and that's no exaggeration, being pulled back, being replenished by new recruits. We'll take them through training, and then they go back to the front. And they do remarkably well, morale-wise, and the cohesion, the way they look after each other. Don't get me wrong, the Ukrainian military has a lot of problems.
Mm-hmm.
Their officer cadre, their officer class, never really embraced the Western way of doing things. And again, think tank land loved this image of the Ukrainians adopting mission tactics. Oh my God, the Green Berets taught them the shit the last 16 months.
There's women fighting on the front lines.
They're like the resistance. Honestly, if you talk to 10th group guys, they're like, yeah, that's all bullshit. And I can tell you it's bullshit. What is not bullshit is the courage and the stories of these groups of individuals who fought the Russians and were experimenting with anti-tank guided missiles and turned out to be remarkably lucky, and in the Russian columns were halted. But the story is not about American mentorship and preparation. It's the opposite of that.
That's an interesting point of view. Yeah.
It's about the fact that they were citizen army, and interestingly enough, the mainstream Ukrainian army, still shackled by its Soviet origins,
Interesting.
kills mission command, kills small unit initiative.
Yeah.
But the fact that these guys hadn't been subjected to that yet.
Yeah.
They were civilians,
Yeah.
and they've been brought up with a Western Europe approach, and Ukrainians are remarkably tech savvy, and they have this. Every nationality has kind of general characteristics. Ukrainians have this. At times, it's almost an annoying. What's the word? Insubordination, right? It's like, no, I can do this better. Blah 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 blah. Fuck you. So it can work both ways. You get Ukrainian civilians having to take on this role, knowing they're defending their families, perform better than professional soldiers. Perform
really
better than. Seriously, courage and everything.
Yeah.
I've heard U.S. and U.K. veterans say that time and again. It's just they don't fucking give up, and they are prepared to die, and they learn quickly.
Can you give us an example of how their leadership style or the officer cadre, based on the Soviet, might be different? The Soviet model might be different than Americans.
Yeah, certainly. So the problem is this. So we look at the Russians, and the Russians have a very low bar when it comes to mission command, and we all understand that the supposed reforms of the Russian army post-Georgia never fucking occurred, right? So, and the dregs of Russian society went into the army because everyone could buy their kid a way out of having to go into the military, right? There was so many other parts that if you went in the military, you were really, really fucked up. And I know from both of you, your experiences and background, you can relate to that particular statement. But subsequently, as you came in, you met people who were, had better stature than you.
Yeah. Couldn't figure out why they were there.
I know, a low bar. But the point is, the dregs went into society. So, all right, very low bar. On the Ukrainian side, and trust me, of course, my pro-Ukrainian credentials are they're pristine, right? I would hope. But the Ukrainians have a problem with lack of mission command, with too much of the Soviet mentality within the military, even within their special operations forces. They don't have a clear understanding of mission command. The Estonian and Polish guys who worked with the Ukrainians longer and more closely than U.S. will say that's their biggest concern. Remember that, it's very interesting because the Poles have followed a similar evolution from, since fall of Soviet Union. But Poles were pulled into NATO, so right away they were getting this. We don't execute mission command well, but nevertheless we understand what it is, and so the Poles were getting hammered with that. The Ukrainians were not, and they struggle with it. And a lot of the foreign soldiers who have come in, the volunteers, Zelensky's Legion, it was managed poorly. They were sent to Ukrainian units as casualty replacements to begin with. It was just a bad setup. But my point is too, they have legitimate complaints about leadership they fell under. I heard some horror stories. In Zaporizhia, was sitting in the lobby of a hotel. Jack, I may have already told you this story. Tell me to shut up if I have. But we're in Zaporizhia, and all these foreign guys come in, non-Ukrainians, gringos, right? And there's a few of them bandaged up. They look pretty beat up. And we start talking to them. All good guys, Americans, Brits from the main group. There was some Finns, Scandinavians, and they had formed basically a company in the Azov, and they had been over the previous 4 days assigned the same mission, executed the same way, attacking a village without fire support. And on the very last time, they found themselves out in the field under Russian artillery fire, and they realized that their platoon commander just fucking doesn't have a clue. So they walk. They're like, we're done. And they can do that. The Ukrainians aren't going to go after that. But it was talking to these guys. There was no chest-beating bravado. There was no there we were. They were all pros, very mature, and they were disappointed and shocked about what had happened. You couldn't help feeling sorry for them. They'd had one of their guys, a Finn, who was very seriously wounded, had been evacuated, and they just felt kind of betrayed by the leadership. But we've heard that story from Ukrainian soldiers too. So what I'm saying is that there is a lot of work to do now, post-war, in shaping the Ukrainian military to be a little more flexible and adapt.
It was some of the press reports would make it sound like exactly as you described, like this Western training and influence has created a core of NCOs in Ukraine, and that's what's helping them win the war. You're saying that's pretty much nonsense.
Yeah, it's absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense. I called SOCUR, friends in SOCUR, as I went back into Ukraine and said, hey, I'm reading about this great resistance organization that 10th Group has set up. Can you put me in contact with them? And got the very straight answer, Andy, that's total bullshit. I wish that was the case. So the Ukrainians did set up a resistance organization, but they didn't really have time to train them effectively, and it kind of dissipated because their goals, their rationale dissipated as the Russians started to withdraw from around Kiev. The South Ukrainians are doing right behind Russian lines.
In DNR.
Yeah. But in Crimea, and in Russia itself, I would guess, and I don't have any great insights, but those, I would say, absolutely, those are not U.S. supplied weapon systems. Those, anything the U.S. supply. I mean, the ranges don't apply anyway, but the U.S. put NATO put stipulations on everything that provided that they would not be used against Russian homeland, not those areas necessarily that Putin has declared within Crimea Russian, but the actual, but anyway, so deep strikes, very possible that there are genuine special operations guys operating within Russia.
There's an SSO patch right next to you there.
Yeah, I was looking at that. Also likely, not just likely, but we know, cyber attacks. What the Ukrainians are doing in the cyber realm, U.S. Cyber Command will learn from, I am sure. and I'm sure it's very interested in doing.
Yeah.
They're doing extraordinary things that border on the kinetic, that are kinetic.
You mentioned like post-war. Do you see being over there? Do you get a sense that the war may be winding down? That Russia is on their last legs, or?
Oh no, I don't. I get the sense that you've got. This is going to be a very poor analogy, but you've got this global stage, right? And you've got two boxers who are both exhausted, but they're both putting up a very determined show, right? So, from the Russian side, yes, they've gone to a high degree of mobilization. It's going to prove quite ineffective. As far as the announcement to fielding of actual guys on the ground who are units of man trained and equipped. But the point is, it doesn't necessarily matter for the Russians. All right. So you think about this. That we all in Western think tank land get very wrapped up in military tactics, and we say, "Oh my God, why are they taking so? The Donbass is strategically unimportant to them." No, it's all important politically, because Putin has said, "That's all I need."
Right.
That's why we started the war. And if he can keep Donbass, and if he can keep that southern strip, he can declare victory, and the Russians will believe him. And we're coming up to the G20 summit, right? Sometime later this month. Guarantee Putin's going to start looking at France and Germany, saying, "Oh, winter's approaching. Things are going to be getting tough. Hey, listen, I'm tired of the bloodshed. I want to negotiate. These fucking crazy Ukrainians, though, insist they want to disembowel Crimea from our blah 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 blah." Mm-hmm. You get it. So I think it's very easy to dismiss Putin as being insane. He's certainly, we can't mirror image him. He doesn't.
Right. We can't profile him. Yeah.
But on the other hand, there's a method to his madness. Mm-hmm. And strategically, he is not failing as badly as we would like to think. Think about the countries of the world who are aligned or not aligned, or at least haven't condemned the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Over half.
Yeah.
Right? So, we can stomp our feet and yell and scream, but it's almost as though Putin is very carefully excising the United States from the global discussions, yeah. Right? It's like, you are no longer irrelevant.
Yeah.
And that's what you'd have heard me be critical of U.S. foreign policy, and that's why I'm critical. It's not because I'm an angry person, although Jack may disagree. It's because I would like to see this country have a coherent foreign policy,
right?
In the same way it did in the past. I mean, you think about how we tackled the whole problem of the Cold War, the Marshall Plan combined with containment. I mean, there was a strategy, a policy. We just don't see that. We don't see. We don't, do we? I mean, gravitas. We don't see that gravitas of understanding.
But even during the Cold War, we still
Jack's not saying anything. He's like, "Fuck you, man."
No, but like even during the Cold War, we still had like Vietnam, where like we had maybe a guideline of a policy and a guideline of a plan, and this is what we're going to do. But even within that, our foreign policy, and I think we've talked about this on the show before. One of the challenges is that it changes so frequently, not just with administrations, but sometimes within the same administration, that other countries don't know what to expect of us.
Or it's not clearly defined.
Yeah.
What is our policy in Ukraine? Are we all in? If we're all in, why aren't we giving them ATACMS out the Yang?
Right.
Why aren't we giving them long-range precision guided drones?
Right.
Or at least enabling them to have them?
Right. Well, and there are people who think that our whole strategy in Ukraine isn't to help Ukraine win. It's just to...
Just bleed Russia.
To bleed Russia.
Yeah. And I have no problem with that. I would just say that probably the most effective way to do that and still retain credibility is to give the Ukrainians better weapon systems, and you get it over quicker.
Yeah.
And understanding that time does not benefit Western democracies, the global norms, time benefits Russia.
Right.
In this particular
Yeah.
case, because of the pool of energy, because of just being able to portray the fact that this is a war of attrition.
Right. Do you feel as though Russia is getting, whether it's sympathy, I don't think it's sympathy, but there's enough utility with Russia. Now we're seeing Iran, and we're seeing pipelines into the country with weapons, drones, things like that. Do you think that there's going to start to be an escalation of arms as they get equipped from outside also?
Yeah, it's very interesting actually what the reaching out to Iran. It was a natural partnership because the Shahed 136 it's made from civilian components, right? So I mean commercially available components. It's a very unsophisticated weapon, but remarkably effective because it used in groups. What I'm saying is I'm agreeing that there's something to be concerned about here. That Russia is still an adaptive society. It's an adaptive government, an adaptive to the extent that it knows how to survive. To a level that we underestimate totally, right? I mean, there's no way, and Putin has aligned himself with that administration. So I'm just saying this is going to be a really tough problem. We, United States, probably cannot influence it. We can only, because as soon as we touch anything, it turns to shit in this regard. We can only hope that the Russian army is increasingly becoming so angry. This is an FSB war. The FSB fucked up everything about this war, but it's the army that's paying. So one would hope that is a black swan event.
Some of it comes across as desperation, though. I understand like these Ukrainian drones are doing some real damage Iranian drones are doing some real damage in Ukraine. Supposedly, they're also having to get shells from North Korea.
Yeah.
There were reports early on in the war that they were recruiting Syrians to come and fight for them.
Afghans, yeah.
And now Afghans, right? They're recruiting Afghan commanders. It seems like this attempt of the Russian government to create like George Bush's coalition of the willing, like the Dave Chappelle skit. We got the Zulu nations and all these kinds of people. But it comes across kind of like a lead balloon. Like I'm not sure this is going to work for Russia.
It's a Potemkin coalition,
right?
Yeah. No, I'm with you, but there are a lot of bad indicators. If you're a Russian right now, a lot of bad indicators, right? I mean, as near as you can get to public dissent now to the war among influential figures.
Right.
Interesting that Putin pulled in. I can't remember his name. Shulkin, the hardline general to head up the war, and you notice that kind of allayed criticism for a little bit. We'll see. My point is this, though, Jack. I agree with you 100%, but I think that Russia has an almost unfathomable ability to absorb punishment,
to suffer.
Yeah. And it's like in their culture, their ethos, and right now Putin has this slide. It's a amazingly 21st century. More of a hermetically sealed society than it was in the latter parts of the communist era, right?
We were talking about that with was it when Holden Triplett was here, or was it one of our other guests we had recently? Where I was talking, and I'm sure you've probably spoken to the people firsthand. Some of these civilians in areas that the Ukrainians have liberated and taken back their territory, and the civilians talk about their interactions with Russian soldiers, and they're saying things like, "Well, why are you upset with us? We're here to free you from Nazis." Like these soldiers, I think, they like whole ass believe the propaganda, and that's kind of that is kind of shocking in 2022 that you can have a society that has been so isolated and that totally believes the state propaganda.
It is extraordinary, and it's even among some of the more educated members of Russian society. So you can perhaps understand soldiers being convinced of that, and the BBC does a really good job on their Ukraine cast of looking at kind of the ethos. or feelings within Russia.
Yeah.
Especially families of soldiers who are lost, and this and that. It's very well done. But you're right. The bottom line is, yes, they genuinely believe that they are fighting Nazis. They are liberating people ethnically like them or historically, culturally like them from a Nazi and corrupt
Like some
regime.
of these more recent speeches Putin has given where he's talking about, we can't let the transsexuals and the gay pride parades win, and we're fighting Satanism. It's like, it's so...
he's putting it all in.
It's so over the top. It's like, it's hard for me to believe even like a Russian grandma with nothing but a Russian television set in her home, like, can believe this.
Jack, can you think, it's so hard to imagine any U.S. politician making a similar type speeches, stirring up the masses and this populist bullshit. Bringing back manufacturing jobs.
The Satanist pedophile cabals.
Building a wall,
we do have, you're right, we do have that vein in American politics today, which freaks me out also.
It's very similar, though, isn't it? That's a scary thing.
It's a similar emotion that's being tapped into, yeah.
And it relies on emotion. It relies, too, on a little bit of, honestly, lack of education. But I pause there because I know very sensibly educated people who have bought into this kind of populist mentality.
Right.
So maybe, just the wrong sort of education. They haven't been through the Dave Park school of continuous, ass rapery.
Nobody wants to go through that school. I give scholarships out all the time, and I can't get anybody to attend.
If you read, I interviewed him like a year ago, Eric Kurlander, who wrote that book Hitler's Monsters.
Yeah.
About the Third Reich and the paranormal, and this guy's a historian, did tons of research. But
Very
like
interesting.
Weimar Germany was like high society. These were highly educated people, and obviously they
very
believed,
cult,
they believed the fascist political propaganda, but quite a few of them came to have like some pretty gnarly, bizarre beliefs in the paranormal as well.
Yeah. Actually, it's really interesting you bring that up because I'm such a geek. I read a book called They Use Dark Forces, written by a guy named Dennis Wheatley, who was in British intelligence during the war, but after the war wrote this book about what they'd learned about the Nazi experimentations with the occult
and everything. Yeah.
I'd never heard of this.
Yeah, it's insane.
I never heard of the book.
It's like things like they would. It sounds insane, but the Abwehr, right, the military intelligence, German military intelligence, were trying to figure out a way to tap into the dreams of British merchant marine captains, right? They were like, if we can meet them on the astral plane, and we can, they were, seriously, they were trying, the
operationalization of the
cult. But if you read through how they were researching this, it wasn't so insane. They were scientists involved in everything.
Mythology.
Yeah.
To be fair, I would say that our own intelligence community has duplicated a lot of that research, in their own way. Where do we get the men who stare at goats, and a lot of the other projects that ran?
That yes, that existed. Like the remote viewing program existed, but. That was like a small program that they put like probably $10 million in because we found out that the KGB was interested in it. Like it wasn't like something that was like mainstreamed into the military.
No, I'm not saying it was, but it was still funded and carried out by
there was
parts of our government.
Yeah. That's right. There was a book that came out about that.
It was Jim Shannon, who passed away about a year
very
ago.
interesting.
Yeah.
But anyway, so you can dismiss all of this, but on the other hand, there's a little bit of belief of truth in there, I think, and but it was very very interesting. The Germans looked at that seriously too.
It's not surprising. There's there's something attractive about it, right? You have an entire culture like in India, the mystics. How many people believe in astrology? You know what I mean? Like and then you go to a Boston Red Sox game and guys there haven't changed their underwear since the last time they won.
That's something Kurlander brought up with me when I interviewed him. He's like, yeah, Jack, I mean, like you say they're crazy, but it's not exactly good social science, because if you go and talk to a mainstream Christian, they're going to tell you a story about this guy who died and then he came back to life and he rose up into the heavens. It's quote unquote crazy, but that it's a belief.
It's a belief. Faith. Right. It's a powerful belief that has led to massive geopolitical.
Well, and every religion, right? Every religion has.
I'm good for now.
Has a certain. I'm probably gonna have a piece, but thanks. But has a certain amount of mythology around it. It's the idea, especially like, the idea, especially like now, science and the world is so open. It's easier to like disbelieve things in general, but especially imagine during the 40s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s.
Movement.
There were mysteries. You know.
There still are. I know this is taking this to a level way beyond the Team House has gone beyond.
No. We're right.
No, I mean,
look,
seriously.
We're going to break out the D&D, the spell book here, the Player's Handbook, and break out some spells pretty soon.
Neuroscience cannot explain everything.
Right.
So in other words, you cannot explain all human motions. You can't break them all down into the physical aspects. I think we all cling on to that, right? Because if you don't believe in that, there's no beyond, right?
Right.
Jack's like, this has nothing to do
with you.
So, no, I'll tell you what it is. My friend, who I introduced you to, Bill the Greek, he's watching this show right now live on he's watching the Andrew Milburn on his show. But anyway, next time Bill heads over there, you should use him for something. He's a good guy.
I would love to meet you, Bill. That's a very catchy moniker too. Bill the Greek. Yeah.
My cousin.
You're all cousins, right?
No.
You go back far enough to Sparta.
So what? This is going to be purely your opinion, and I know nobody knows what Putin's going to do. Do you, or is there a sense amongst Americans or Ukrainians, anybody, that there's a nuclear threat on the rise?
Yeah, certainly. I think the Ukrainians are particularly worried about that. Ukrainian public is worried about that. I would say that, I mean, you've read the intelligence analysis on that. That is not such a big threat. Yeah, so me personally, I don't worry about that. But I will, I do, probably because, like you, I'm institutionalized, and I like to believe the comforting things like, hey, this is an anthrax injection.
Right, it's for my own good. It's going to bleed for 5 days.
It's going to help you in the long run.
Right,
yeah.
right.
And have no effect on your miserable sex life.
Right,
and
right.
And your ability to unsustain an erection you cannot subsequently sue the U.S. government for.
Right, exactly.
Which is
for me, like I don't have I wouldn't
Smallpox,
really
too.
give it much of a thought.
That's right.
But then, when Biden comes out and says we're on the verge of nuclear Armageddon, and New York puts out, public safety measures, then all of a sudden, I'm wondering, are they reading something that I'm completely unaware
No,
of?
I think we're playing in Putin's hands. You're talking about don't get me wrong. I'm not saying underestimate him. I'm not dismissing him. But I'm just saying that we cannot all walk on eggshells,
right?
Because we're worried about this or that. We have to have some faith in the fact that, or no, let me avoid saying that. Let me say instead that if we keep tiptoeing around Putin's red lines, we are in the end.
Can't let him hold
We're
us
empowering
hostage.
him.
Right.
Yeah, we're empowering him.
Right.
We're causing him to be more crazy, and we're just setting a shitty example
Right.
to the world, right?
Right.
Instead of saying, "Hey, fucker,
Enough is
whatever.
enough.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. By the way, we are going to do a no-fly zone here, and this and that. And what are you going to do about it? And by the way, yes, you can go to whatever, but I mean, the Russian nuclear arsenal is it's obviously something to be worried about.
Right.
But we all know that, given the ability to do first strike, preemptive strike on first indications, we can. So why not message that to Putin?
Right.
Hey, dude, you and I both know the rules of the game.
Right. Right.
So
If you listen to, I can't remember the name of the guy, it was somebody on the National Security Council, and he was doing an interview with like Meet the Press or something like that, and he was saying like, the way he was making it sound was like, hey, he said, we're not going to get into a public like tit for tat with the Russians, like if you do this, we'll do that.
Yeah.
But he was like, yes, we clearly communicated to them, if you take actions, if you escalate to WMDs, this is what we're going to do. And I mean, they made it sound like, hey, if you drop on Kiev, we drop on St. Petersburg, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's speculation on my part, just based on what I heard.
yeah, the problem is, I don't think. I mean, Putin won't trump on Kiev. He will, if he is going to do something, he will do nuclear detonation above the Black Sea.
Yeah.
For
a
this is what
massive
we're gonna
EMP.
see, which will still cause fucking problems for the world.
Right.
But it is not as directly confrontational as
Right.
doing something on a city.
Yeah. Yeah, that would create some massive problems for
But-
the world.
So, strategically, Putin he still, I mean, I won't say he holds the reins, but he is he's in a more powerful seat than he should be,
Yeah.
concerning how he's fucked up. On the operational tactical level, things don't look good for either side. And that's why I'd say it's going to take a black swan event to cause a conclusive end of this war in the next
You mean
18
a
months.
decisive victory for somebody?
It was somebody.
But
Or which would be a decisive victory, Putin overthrow, right? But even then, the Russians would have to concede fucking everything. So who knows? I mean, whoever comes behind Putin, unlikely to do that. The Ukrainians are determined that no part of Ukrainian soil should be still within Russian control, to include Crimea.
that's
Right.
what Zelensky said today.
Yeah, which makes it problematic from a number of, so even one of the reasons, honestly, why annexation of Crimea was not such a big deal, it was a huge deal, but I mean, why it was not taken as such a big deal is Crimea had been battered back and forth between Ukraine and Russia, what was Russia then, the Soviet Union, since the early 50s. And there was a lot of feeling, even among Ukrainians, that, hey, population's mostly Russian-speaking, what the fuck, it doesn't really matter. But, of course, strategically, access to the Black Sea was a huge deal. But it doesn't matter. Prior to this last, the kickoff in February, Ukrainians were reconciled to having lost Crimea and most of Donbass. Now they are not. They
Right.
want it all back, and that's going to be problematic.
Do you have a sense that, obviously, Ukraine is the aggrieved party here, 100%. There was no justification for what Russia did. But do you have a sense at all that Ukraine may potentially overplay their hand?
Yeah. No, I see what you're saying, Dave. I think, well, let me backtrack for a moment. So, this is really bad for a guest on a podcast to say, but I don't know how I feel about Ukrainian determination now to take back Donbass, Luhansk, all of Donetsk, and Crimea. I support it. I just don't know how practical it is.
Right. You
And I
support
don't
the
know.
idea of it and where it's coming from.
Right.
Right.
And so the other part, because it's a great question, Dave, is that the Ukrainians actually are undermining their own cause with their terrific propaganda. So their information operations campaign was very effective at the strategic level. It's not at tactical level. It's shitty. They could take so much more advantage of Russian morale by inducing surrenders. They don't do that. They don't do that. In fact, their mantra of hatred towards Russians is not helping them. They should reach out to Russian soldiers, say, you want Ukrainian citizenship, you get your own fucking computer and an apartment in Odessa and, whatever.
A washing machine.
Washing machine, yeah. I know.
Washing shit.
Yeah,
I'll take them up on that.
You didn't see the videos of them, washing machines being loaded in tanks,
Stealing like the kids' Disney sheets
Yeah.
and shit like this, yeah. But I mean, all of that said, I mean, the Ukrainians, inch by inch, are retaking territory, and I mean, some pretty stunning successes over the last, month and a half or so.
Yeah, I mean, I would be cautious though, Jack, about calling them stunning successes. So
Well, they were unexpected at least for me
no,
personally.
100%. So, but I'm agreeing with you. They were. I'm not undermining the success that happened. I'm just saying that you have to look forward to what did they lead to, and that's my concern. So, so let's look at the north. All right, the Kharkiv breakthrough, 6,000 square miles is what the Ukrainians claim. Could well be. It's significant, but and it was well done. It was a result of initiative at brigade level. So 3 brigades broke through. They saw, the Russians were on the ropes. Russians were even signaling that they raised a fucking white flag by Izium train station. So it didn't take intelligence analysts to say, okay, I think, guys, I see a gap, and they are bailing out along the roads, and so the Ukrainians moved in. And there was a lot preceding that, with HIMARS strikes and all that. But the Ukrainians moved forward, but they instantly were out of gas. I mean, not out of gas, literally. They didn't have the resources to exploit that. 3 brigades moved forward, and once they got through Izium, they took Lyman. They dug in because they couldn't exploit any. And that sadly is, I think, what we're going to see on the Ukrainian side is you're going to see individual small unit actions, seizing initiative, taking ground, but it's going to be very small, and there's no means to exploit it because the Ukrainians don't have that. On the Russian side, I get it. There's been that good news, but the good news is kind of over, right? In Kherson, by the way, Kherson, a counteroffensive kicked off early September. It was October by the time the media started reporting, they're making gains. 10, 20 kilometers, huge losses, both sides. These aren't stories of Guderian-type victories.
Right.
That, they are, it's a hard grind, and it's an indicator of what lies ahead.
Right.
And so when I say black swan event, Russian side, someone overthrows Putin. I think from the U.S. side, bear in mind I'm being unemotional here, if the U.S. government really seriously wants, number one, Ukrainian victory, number two, serious depletion of Russia, militarily, economically, and in public perception, then it behooves the United States to give Ukraine, really embrace the prospect of Ukrainian victory, give them the intelligence they need, give them the advice. They don't have to put boots on the ground. Give them the advising for a serious campaign plan. But give them the long-range platforms.
They're not. I mean, you don't feel that they're getting targeting intelligence from the United States. That they're not.
Certainly, yeah.
Yeah, that they're not.
To some extent.
We have troops in Poland, Romania. I mean, that they're not getting advice and.
I think they are, Jack. I know they are, but not as far as campaign planning. This isn't the fault of the United States alone. It's Ukrainians too, because the Ukrainians are not being forward and saying, "Hey, here's what we plan to do. We could really use help and intel here, and what you suggest here." That dialogue is not taking place. So it's not. I'm not simply blaming USG.
Yeah, I get it.
Understand.
It's a partnership.
Yeah,
that has to
it's
take
got to be a
place.
partnership, but we on the US side have developed a partnership and understand that hardening the lines of NATO does not encourage the Ukrainians because they know where they lie on that other side of NATO. So,
what hardware do you think we should be looking at giving to the Ukrainians? I mean, like I've tongue in cheek in the past said we should, if they want F-16s and Abrams M1A1 tanks, we should give it to them. People have brought up, well, there's a lot of maintenance and upkeep and a training curve. It's not just about the hardware; it's also about the people and the joint arms and all.
It's about
you know more about it than I do, Andrew. But
no, you're right. It's about the culture, how they use stuff, right? So I've talked about this before. Artillery, they use artillery in a very centralized fashion. When they use it in a centralized manner, combined with their ability to collect intelligence, they do it quite effectively. But the problem with that is one phase. And in a defensive operation, subsequently, you need to decentralize your use of artillery, right, as you're moving. So the opening phase is, and it gets great Western media coverage. Oh my God, look what they've done with HIMARS. Awesome.
we see the kill camera like every day.
Yeah, awesome. But they can't follow that up by supporting units as they cross the line.
Right.
Because they're not agile enough. There's no such thing as a forward observer. There's no such thing as close fast.
So they're not nearly as good at maneuver warfare as we might expect from looking at the video footage.
No. To see the reports about in the Western media about, oh my God, they've mastered combined arms was absolutely horseshit. Again, what took Kharkiv and environs and all that was reading the tea leaves. But there was no real combined arms. There was none. I mean, we were there. I mean, it's not like I'm not pretending to be an expert covering everything, but I happen to be in Izium. I happen to be on the.
You were debriefing the guys as they came off the lines.
Yeah, I mean, so we've got to be honest. There was Russians moving out. We're moving in.
Do you think that the sort of the positive spin on the Ukrainian war effort is due to like a lack of knowledge of actual military operations and overestimating what's happening?
I think it's all good and well intentioned, Dave. But the problem is this, and I've got tremendous respect for what the media is doing, all right, for their mission. Of course, we've all had problems with individual journalists. You know what I mean?
Well, everybody has a problem with Jack.
I mean, look at Jack. What a pain in the ass he is as a journalist. But Jack, no, I mean, I think Jack would applaud this.
So proud to hear that.
No, I mean, I think Jack would applaud this statement. Is that you've got to be a pain in the ass to be a journalist. You've got to really question. You should be pissing off military people, and I'm not getting the sense that it's happening in Ukraine because journalists are not allowed near the front line, so the Ukrainians control that. And some of the problems I've seen in where journalists are questioning people, the Ukrainians, I think perhaps they're not aggressive enough, Does that make sense?
Yeah. There's a lot of lightweight reporting, I think.
And so they're not getting personal perception on the front line, not their fault. They're accepting the Ukrainian government's version of what's happening on the front line, and they're not being very...
It's weird.
Challenging.
It's weird because it's such a total spin of how they cover the U.S. at war.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, in terms of, it doesn't matter if they're on the front line; they'll make up the story sometimes. But but they're willing to be critical of U.S. efforts and what the U.S. is doing. But here it seems almost as if it's taboo to say anything negative about.
And I think, and it's hurting, and it's about, they need to be more critical about Ukrainian control of information, because Ukrainian control of information is undermining themselves.
Yeah.
You just have to look at their press reports now. They're almost Soviet, and they're, it's like, hey, dudes, you have a good story to tell. Don't fucking overdo it, and don't bastardize it or dilute it with bullshit, all right? Don't justify violations of law of armed conflict.
Right.
There's a lot of bandwagoning, and when you see like the mainstream press reporting on like, you know, the social media phenomena of people making their avatars the little dogs, and you know, the FAFO people and stuff. Like, you're seeing these like stories like this. It's like, this isn't exactly hard-hitting reporting you guys are doing here. And I won't get into details, but I mean, I've encountered some of it myself in my writing, that I get the sense that there are a lot of people who don't want to rock the boat, even if it's a story that points to good things, successful things that certain entities might be involved in. That I feel like there's a reluctance to step outside a very narrow left and right limits of a certain type of reporting.
Yeah, and it hurts us because it produces a very unimaginative approach. So even among, strangely enough, DoD, right? You know, so you think about, and this isn't me putting a plug in for the Mozart group, but we are doing essentially two things. We're training Ukrainian military units, right, near the front line. And we're looking all the time for what are the things that only we can do, that separates us from other volunteer organizations. And training Ukrainian units near the front line, giving them a very short course because we are constrained by time. But in that course, they will get the maximum benefit. So that's what I think is our niche as far as training. And by the way, we're doing this within artillery range of the Russians. So, you know, I mean, I'm not overplaying the risk. I'm just saying there is a risk, and, you know, we're happy to accept it because we understand the payoff.
You know, Andy, we want to talk about the Mozart group, but before we do that, I want to talk about you a little bit, because...
Oh, let me just talk very quickly.
Yes, please.
And I love where you're going with this. The second thing we do is humanitarian assistance.
Okay.
And I want everyone to understand that. So by that I mean where our niche is, we cover the last few miles from the last covered and concealed position outside Russian artillery range. We go not just within Russian artillery range, but into direct fire range to take civilians out of areas under bombardment. And I will say, honestly, we're the only non-government organization that is doing that right now. And that's not a criticism of anyone else. We all understand the risk calculus. And these other organizations have been hugely supportive for us, but we all understand that Mozart Group is the group that goes, the movie that's going to come out, don't laugh, the movie is going to be called The Mozart Mile, because it's about that last mile when you go. It's more than 1 mile, but the Mozart Mile sounds
it's better. I
mean, you can't call it the Mozart several kilometers.
Yeah,
or, the Mozart, 7,500.
Yeah, over the Mozart, the Mozart over that hill there.
Yeah. Anyway.
How hard is it for you? Okay, before we get into just how awesome you are, how hard is it for you guys?
Hey, that's a good theme, though. I like that topic.
How hard is it for you recruiting for the Mozart Group then, to screen out the guys who want to get some?
Yeah. Dave, again, thank you for that great question. And I want to add that Dave has no prior affiliation with me or the Mozart Group, and has not received any funding before this.
Which I'm,
Yeah, I know.
But
it's
very
away.
disappointed.
I know.
Give your Venmo.
For David, the funding is in shots. It's very simple. Yeah, that's a really good question. So, bottom line is this, that from the start, we have paid very close attention to who we bring on board. And that has benefited us. I've had 2 drinks. Benefited us.
You've had more than 2, Andy.
Oh, 3. Come on. Let's be serious. My shirt's still on. More than we realize. It really has. So secondhand, I heard from a friend of mine who spoke to Eric Prince, and about the growth and of Blackwater, and Eric Prince, if you're listening to this and you didn't say this, my apologies. I'm exempt from you suing me. But apparently he said, hey, listen, one thing I wish I'd paid more attention to was recruiting. because we were military guys in the business world. So we're thinking we got to think about business models. We got to, instead of what we knew best, which was people, and we lost track of that, and we brought in the wrong people, and it had strategically adverse results on the institution.
Because they grew so fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we have paid, rather than business models and everything else, we have paid huge attention to who we bring in, and are very quick to cut loose people who we feel are not right. And it's, what is right? I mean, it's, both you guys know, because you've been through selection systems, you can have the most incredibly selective system and still get people who come through who really aren't right for the job, right?
Right.
And we understand that. So the people we bring in are either, it's very unscientific, we either know them, or there's, 2 degrees separation, someone that we know.
Right.
And that has worked a good.
The last time I talked to you, I think you were also saying you were more looking for like gentlemen of your age that have gray in their hair. You're not looking necessarily for a 22-year-old, looking to get some, as Dave points out.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go to the extremes of, my age, but for the most part, most part, the guys we have, so our demographic is probably a guy in his mid-30s, typically special operations, but not necessarily. We've got, some, for instance, Brits who are conventional guys. And you look a little bit deeper, they've often, they've done well in the civilian world too. They're not here because they failed somewhere. It's interesting. Yeah, very wide.
Yeah.
11 different countries, but the demographic of the guy is quite similar.
Yeah. I imagine...
Overachiever, but believer. He believes in something. He's perhaps a little disgruntled about his experiences in Afghanistan or Iraq,
I imagine also just having come out of a 20-year war, that it's beneficial to have guys that are already blooded, so they're not necessarily like looking for that, because that's an attractor. You're
right, Dave. Yeah, 100%. So having guys. So generally speaking, the guys that we have are they're very cautious, but it's not overly. It's difficult to describe. What I meant is they're not the reckless dudes. We have to do things that are very high risk, but what I meant by very cautious is they have a very good feel for what's going on, and we all respond to the instincts of anyone in the team. So if anyone's like, guys, we need to fucking get out of here, I don't have a good feeling, we get out, and then we'll talk about it afterwards,
Yeah.
But we don't, 9 times out of 10, people's instincts have proven to be right, because without getting too paranoid, I mean, it's a different, we talked about, you need guys who've had combat experience, but the combat experience we're experiencing is very different. It's, I mean, I went through the Battle of Fallujah, so that was probably the most intense experience that Marines had, for instance, in Iraq, because once you're in that building, you're on equal terms with the dudes. Actually, you're at a disadvantage to the guys defending that building. Doesn't matter what country you come from, how many resources you have on the side, it is now man against man, and they outnumber you, and you're in the dark, and you don't have MVGs, and, so that was a very formative, scary experience for me. But I can tell you, too, the brief periods have been under Russian artillery fire where you can hear the whistling of the shells coming down. That was a formative experience. And these are not nice formative experiences.
Right.
These are formative experiences I would rather avoid.
But
my point is that, so I had I think I had a fairly high bar about combat. There's a lot of, how it is. I mean, we deal with this at the time that people, I was in combat for 15 months. But I don't get involved in those conversations. But I would argue that in Ukraine, the level of that intensity is like nothing that I've experienced. I mean, twice now I've been buzzed. I say buzzed because I don't know if the guy was firing rockets or not. I think he was both times, but been buzzed by an Su-25, like flying low, releasing shit, flares and rockets. And that is gut-churningly. That is a formative, life-changing experience.
It's hard, I think, for an American, especially with combat experience, to imagine being on the other side of air power.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it was always on our side.
Yeah. It's very humbling. And it's not just the jets, it's drones all the time, so we, as we go into these places, we want the sky, we want it to be raining.
Right.
It's like, and we never thought about that before. Normally you're like, hey, we want good. Now we want it to be raining, and we're always looking at the sky when it's clear for drones.
So you find yourself waiting for the bad weather to move in, and then you're like, okay, we go.
Well, we don't have that luxury because we respond to requests.
Uh-huh.
So every day we will have requests, and we respond to them that day because often they're very time sensitive. And if the weather suits, it suits, but most often it does not, and it's very clear. And from the time that you've been spotted by drones, you've got 2-3 minutes before artillery rounds start landing. So that's my point about underestimating the Russians. Their infantry is shite. We can ballyhoo all we want about that, although we didn't do anything about that. But they are very good with artillery, and it's particularly scary. And I think, the units that we've spoken to that are showing most signs probably of what we call battle fatigue, it's all artillery. I mean, it's...
What about the Russian EW capabilities? Are you finding an electronic warfare environment out there?
Yeah, they're very good at... I'm not an electronic warfare expert, but I can say this, that they barrage jam everything, and they do it very effectively. So,
in like encrypted comms?
Well, no one's using encrypted comms on the Ukrainian side, so it's hard to tell.
Okay, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, but they are jamming fucking everything, our radios, our
UHF and everything else.
And so it is a very extensive branch jamming, and I've heard that they can switch very quickly to point jamming, for instance, so drones to bring them down. So they've become effective at that, certainly.
How about cell phone and sat phones?
They have not exploited, neither side has exploited signals intelligence to, I think, fullest tactical capability. I mean, I could be wrong. I know that at higher level within the Ukrainian command, they are targeting using signals intelligence, obviously.
Right.
But that capability does not exist at the tactical level.
In the trenches.
Brigade, battalion level, which is a shame because both sides are very, very sloppy in the use of cell phones.
Right. Real quick, for the people who have not had the privilege of meeting you before and seeing your other shows, and you should definitely go watch them.
I'm buying my book.
We're going to talk about your book because your book is absolutely phenomenal. It was honestly one of the best nonfiction books I've ever read, and I'll tell you why in a second. But you have a kind of a strange accent. Is that Tennessee?
Very close. Yeah.
Can you?
Yeah. So no, so I grew up in the UK.
Okay.
And I didn't come to the United States, so I went to boot camp, Paris Island. I was 24 years old. I'm swallowing not out of emotion, although that was a very emotional experience, nor because I've drunk too much, but simply because I think you watered down your whiskey.
Oh.
And
come here. Sorry about that.
No, Dave. I
think those are fighting words, right?
No, I didn't. Why
that's
not?
like a duel at 20 yards or 20 paces.
I'm not suggesting you watered down your whiskey. Oh yeah, so I was actually, it's quite kind of interesting, not because I was involved in it, but back then there were armed forces recruiters in London who were, whose purview were all the high school kids throughout Europe, all the U.S. high school kids.
For American armed forces or for British?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So the guy I ran into was a Brit who had joined the U.S. military, joined the Marines because he knew in draft. So this is an extraordinary. His family moves to his kind of a boring story, I'll make it very short.
No, please.
Not that boring. Anyway, so his father works for Boeing, right?
Uh-huh.
He's a Brit. They go to Washington State in the 60s. They register, apply for green cards. He gets a draft notice when he turns 18 before he gets, his green card. So he enlists in the Marine Corps because someone ill-advisedly told him, hey, you should join the Marines because it's cool.
Right.
And not be drafted into the Army. So he did. And did 3 tours in Vietnam, blah, blah, blah. Reaches E9, Master Gunnery Sergeant, goes back to the UK on his twilight tour as a recruiter. Still doesn't have US citizenship. I'm like, how did you fuck that one up? So you're just going to pretend this whole affiliation with the United States didn't happen. Now you're going to go back in the UK and just settle there. It's like, oh, maybe I should. Anyway.
So why did you pick the Marine Corps instead of like a British?
Yeah, why? No, I selected the British Army. They turned me down. I broke my leg playing rugby at college, and it was a bad break. And the British Army basically said, go away. You are medically, physically totally unqualified. And my leg only bends 90 degrees even now, which technically disqualifies me from the U.S. military too, but it's really how you use it, right?
That's what they say.
Yeah, I've heard Jack talk about this in reference to a small penis, but the point is that
If you don't use it, you lose it.
exactly,
Yeah.
but it's like, it's how you adapt. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you joined the Marine Corps. Can you give us sort of a like a brief career history in the Marine Corps, because you had a fascinating career.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll give you like 30-second version. So I went in as a private, which is, I don't regret actually. Reached the dizzy heights of corporal.
Ooh.
You may laugh, but corporal was the hardest
No, I
rank.
do. I know.
Corporal was the hardest rank I ever held. And I was hanging on by my fingernails. And then got a commission. Was fortunate enough or unfortunate enough to be in the 1st Battalion to land in Somalia, which is a big deal back in the 90s. Then, went through the Stations of the Cross and the Marine Infantry Officer, Company Command, blah, blah, blah. 7th Marines during the invasion of Iraq, Battalion Commander in Karma, which is a dreadful, dreadful place. And then when I became a colonel, the Marine Corps promotion system broke down. Transitioned to, for command, I went to the Marine Special Operations Command to take over the regiment, which seemed like an extraordinary choice at the time. But I think it was because in my past I'd done stuff overseas. Just like, how the Marine Corps is. It's like we don't trust anything that is different.
Right.
So we'll put some of our weirdo guys
Right.
there.
It's a punishment.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
They'll see how it works out. But I loved it. Yeah, I loved the Marine. I loved having the regiment. Then commanded the 1st Marine-led Special Operations Task Force that happened to be in the counter-ISIS fight in Iraq 2016. And then retired out of SOC Cent 3 years later.
Went from private to colonel in the Marine Corps, which is no easy feat.
Yeah, I did. Yes. Thank you.
And
I didn't think about that.
and then you wrote this book, When the Tempest Gathers, and can you tell us where the title comes from?
Yeah, it's actually, I was struggling for a title, and then someone sent me that poem.
Was it a Kipling poem?
No, it's not. No, it's Holland, right? It's just it's like he's going to call me on it now.
No, I'm not going to call you on it because obviously,
and it's an American actually, and but he basically wrote a poem saying, that there is a. Essentially, it's about what a small percentage of the population actually, when everything collapses, are the dudes who are, in the front line, basically.
So the 4 stanzas you have, and it's Holland, like you said, is give us men.
Thank you for that, David.
It's all you. It's that is that
now the first line says "Give us men,"
Yeah.
which
is a Navy phrase.
Yeah.
But men who, when the tempest gathers, grasp the standards of their fathers in the thickest fight. And one of the things that I really loved about your book is because you were in a leadership position through a lot of this. And a lot of the book wasn't just about your experiences, but about your internal landscape through those experiences, about your doubts, about leadership, about am I making the right calls? Even if you're not a person who enjoys reading military history or autobiographies about military subjects, it's a very human journey because there were a lot of other things going on in your life at the time and how those integrate. It's a very, very human journey that I just thought was incredibly insightful and vulnerable.
No, thanks for that. When I sat down to write it, I had a discussion with a good friend of mine, Worth Parker, who's a Marine.
He's been on this show before.
Has he? Yeah. It's a super guy. Marine recon, special operations guy, but great writer and just a good all-rounder. And his point was, hey Andy, do you want to write a book that is touted by the Marine Corps Association as this is a great compilation of lessons learned?
Right.
Or do you want to write a book that dudes read that they can relate to because they've been through some shitty times?
Right.
And he was right. And so that's why I came out in the book and wrote about a lot of struggles I'd had. I'm cautious about using the term PTSD. My father, who was a Second World War veteran, would laugh at that. But certainly no thinking, generally sensitive human being goes through combat and remains unchanged, right?
Right.
So I want to write about that change, in my case, without being maudlin or,
Right.
But it's important to recognize that change.
Yeah.
And understand it and not lose track. So I tried to combine it. It's a difficult task when you're writing about yourself, and you don't want to write just about what you see in front of you. You want to write a little bit about what you know is going on above you, and then integrating the part about the human piece, as you know. I mean, I saw some not just combat stress, but human. Tragedies within my family and stuff like that.
Right.
I had the same guidance from my editor when I was writing my book, and she kept coming back to me and saying okay, Jack, but what were you thinking? What were you feeling as this happened?
Yeah.
Because I also had this tendency to write in a very sort of clinical sort of way. This is how the battle unfolded, and this is what happened, and this guy did this, and that guy did that, and the vehicles moved over there. And she kind of had to tease that part out.
It's not easy, is it? Writing about your own, because it's a balance. Because you don't want to inject too many of your own emotions. Some things you just want to describe and let the reader inject their emotions, right? And you can't constantly be saying, my heart was beating viciously against my chest, I felt a surge of adrenaline as I watched the 45 caliber round tear through my opponent's leg.
And there are books like that, and they're great. They're great, and they do the job of what I think the author wants to do, which is to convey that experience.
Catharsis.
But I feel as though it's...
What are you looking for, Andy?
No, I'm just... Last time I was here, Dave drank all my whiskeys, so I just want to make sure.
That's yours.
This is mine, yeah.
Are you sure?
It's not watered down.
Yeah.
It's not watered down.
It's a book like that is great for the intent of the author and what they want to convey, but it's like both of you said, because Jack, in your book too, you express your doubts about things and how you felt, and not only you being vulnerable, which doesn't, I think, come naturally to a lot of people, but you're doing it permanently. You are putting it in black and white. It's going out on the shelves. It will be forever be out there, right? Yeah. Where you can't just go, I was drunk last night. Did I say something? What did I say? I don't even remember what I said.
How long did it take you to write your book?
Less than a year.
No.
But-
Dave, why haven't you written a book yet?
Oh, nobody wants to read about anything I did.
No, absolutely, you're wrong.
I think part of it also is you see some of the controversies with some of these other books, and if there was any flack to be caught, I wanted it to be on me and not like on my teammates. So as I kind of hesitant also to like expound on some things that like maybe would make one of the other guys look bad or he'd feel ashamed of something when really he shouldn't at all. It's just, I don't know, that's a really like sort of, as you know, you've been in combat with other soldiers or other Marines.
Yeah.
And it's a very difficult, very emotional experience for everyone involved. And it's not that I want to whitewash war or combat or anything, but I was a little careful about how I wrote about other people's experiences.
Yeah, you have to be.
Yeah.
And that's why I tried to portray in the book that, hey, this is, I talk about one experience in Fallujah where I see two guys killed in front of me, the two Marines, as they open the gate and they're killed. And I've met 4 or 5 guys since then who are on the same street at the same time, and our memories are all slightly different.
Yeah.
And the cool thing, though, when I wrote about the experience in the book, the guys who chimed in were like, hey, for the most part, I remember that. And, every one of them, none of them said, hey, no, this is what
Totally
happened.
wrong,
Everyone was like,
Yeah.
oh, wow. Hey, yeah, that was a really, I accept that I was so scared at the time that I probably got, but this is what I remember.
Yeah. I remember those things like that coming out in hot washes, and AARs is, I moved this way and I shot the guy on the, on the corner of this house.
Yeah.
It's like, you weren't on that side of the house. It's like,
Yeah. I mean, adrenaline does funny things to the mind, right? It really does.
I remember when I wrote the book and there were portions of it that were about some of my teammates, and I showed it to them. Like, is this how you remember it? Like, what's your input? What do you think? And there were certain times where I had not like huge discrepancies, but I remember my guys saying things that they have no memory of.
Yeah.
They're like, I didn't say that. I don't remember.
Yeah.
And
100%.
And I don't think they're lying or anything like that. I think, like you said, the adrenaline's pumping really high. You're in an emotional moment.
You have to understand that you are capable too.
Absolutely, yeah.
Of
it's possible
of that.
I got something off.
That's why that was one of my struggles in the book. There was another episode in there where I remember very clearly. Obviously, I don't know. Driving up to the Yala River and watching the bridge across the Yala River blow up in our faces. But the guy I am with, Jeff Eby, good friend of mine, is like, no, man, that didn't happen. It happened the next morning or whatever while we were asleep, and it's so strange. And he said, and it wasn't someone blowing it up. I think it was a cumulative effect of airstrikes. It just collapsed.
Yeah.
But my memory's so distinct. I'm like,
Right.
Jeff, how can you? We were just fucking sitting side by side. But then you factor in the fact we're both very tired, been up all night. We're both scared, in the early days of OIF, and so I understand. But how do you write about that?
Yeah.
I say, hey, this is what I remember, but
Right.
I've got to remember. But I wanted to say, but just to show how different other people, view it, and no one. I've got to tell you, no one. I got people attack me for the book because of
Attack
whatever.
you for the book?
Yeah. But no one has challenged my version of events, and I think it's because I was trying to be in every case where I'm like, this is how I remember, but this is how other people saw it, and I say again, this is essentially what combat's like. No one fucking. If anyone has certainty afterwards about what happened, they don't understand what just happened.
Yeah.
That's a very honest way to write a book, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's probably the reason why I would never write a biography is that my memory is so shot about like so many, like just because of the TBIs and stuff like that. Like I would have to ask the people, not just in combat. I mean, going all the way back to like the Navy, and the Marine Corps. Like I would have to ask people, like, what do you remember? Because I barely remember anything.
Well, I wrote a lot of, I wrote in the evenings. I wrote a journal that really helped me, and I can't understand why I started writing. I think I wrote it to clear my thoughts.
You said you wrote this book in like a month?
3 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I was writing. It was very cathartic.
Yeah.
I mean, you remember this, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you set yourself a goal, 2,000 words a day, and then you find often that you exceed that. But the real writing is editing afterwards, right? You go back. So I tried to follow the advice of just write, don't think about.
That's true.
Yeah, but it's very difficult
Because it
to
paralyzes people.
Yeah. So you just write, you pull your thoughts down, and then you go back and edit it, and just accept the fact that you suck first time around. But
When you left the Marine Corps, so you left the Marine Corps, and now, now you're doing this amazing thing in Ukraine. What were the intermittent years like for you?
generally they sucked, actually, except for the Team House podcast.
And when we were getting drunk in Washington, D.C., that was fun.
It was. It's not that it sucked, Dave. It was the fact that, and don't get me wrong, I left the military very happy to leave. I loved my time in the Marine Corps. I did not embrace my rank. I didn't want to take my rank with me. But honestly, just like for a lot of us, the intervening years between getting out in Ukraine were not easy. I was a contractor, and it's not that I don't like being the bottom of the pyramid. Again, I kind of relish that, but the problem is too that you start getting frustrated about all the things you saw in the military that sucked, and now you totally cannot fucking change them because you're a contractor,
right?
You know, and you're at the behest of people who are basically bad officers, you know, and so that was frustrating for me. I was like, fuck, man. I got away from the military because I found it frustrating, even as a colonel, to get shit done. Now I'm a contractor. I'm below some major who's an idiot, and now he's. It was good money, but it was not. There was no real sense of purpose, right? I just felt I was sucked into the bureaucracy again, and then now with Ukraine. I feel 100% differently. I feel again sense of purpose, more so perhaps. Definitely than when I was in the military. And it's not just because I'm not, I'm not, everyone says, oh, you're learning Ukrainian. I'm like, no. And part of it is because I'm abhorrently, lazy when it comes to languages. I know French, I know Spanish, and that's about my field. I'm not going to be able to learn Ukrainian. But also, I want people to understand this isn't about Ukraine for me. Mm-hmm. It's cool. We can get all emotional about Ukraine, this and that, but Ukraine has a lot of fucking answers to Ukrainian, government, bureaucracy, military. It's a corrupt, fucked up society. Mm-hmm. So I'm not a big fan of Ukraine. For its, I care deeply about its people.
Right.
I care deeply about the Ukrainian soldiers because they're human beings, and I have a history of being a human being. But nationality, the fucking government, no.
Yeah.
But in fairness, this is about way more than Russia and Ukraine. So the people who come back to me and say, "Oh, you're getting too obsessed with this," blah blah blah, like, no, I don't think you understand. And I know you can swallow this, this mantra of, well, this is great, we're bleeding the Russians dry. And it's like, but you've got to also understand the other dynamics in this of appearance of U.S. passivity is not helping us.
Right.
I mean, it really is not.
Not only that, but yes, we are bleeding Russia dry, but it's Ukrainian blood. Like there are actually people who are bleeding.
Yeah. So exactly. So if you are weird enough to think that human life is equal regardless of nationality, a very extraordinary point of view.
Right. Right.
Like, never understood how anyone can oppose that point of view. But anyway, so if you are weird enough to think that human life is all equal, people are still fucking paying for this. And by the way, it may be an unsustainable
Right.
cost if you would the Ukrainians are losing this number of guys. And so why not empower the Ukrainian military, flood them with ATACMS?
Right.
You know, that's not enough. I mean, wholehearted intelligence support, wholehearted planning support.
Right.
And the Ukrainians have to give up too.
In a way, it seems that it might be hurting us also, not just with the image of passivity, but also, I don't know how much money we sent to Ukraine so far, but we could give them that same amount of money, higher tech weapons, or more money. That if we just keep on like dragging this out, how much are we willing to spend? Is there truly no limit?
Well, I mean, it's a great question, David, but the problem is this, that we're throwing money at the problem. So what were the headlines? $37.4 billion package to aid Ukraine. But what did that mean? It meant excess defense articles. It meant holy shit. It meant dozens of 113. I mean, we've just watched a war in which T-90s, fairly high-tech military vehicles, armored vehicles, tanks, are totally destroyed without a chance of having fired a shot. And what do? We give the Ukrainians 113s, total fucking death traps. We give them towed artillery, right? The obsolete.
Right.
M777s, oh my God, that's fucking awesome. Yeah, it is a great towed artillery piece. But when you're towing artillery and the Russians can bring counter battery fire down in 4 minutes.
Right.
You're giving them a bait,
Right.
right? No U.S. artillery battery can displace in 4 minutes. You see what I'm saying? It's like we're providing this shit,
Right.
that makes
Well,
them
it
more
was like
vulnerable.
we're clearing out old stocks.
We're unloading stocks, and we're like, holy shit! Look what we're doing for them.
Yeah.
It's like we're either in or out. That's all I'm saying.
So
Let's
you're
have a
saying the
coherent
U.S.
policy.
should either shit or get off the pot?
Yeah, let's fucking say, all right, we're going to give we're going to give you, we're going to flood you with ATACMS. With the HIMARS platforms with ATACMS, 300 kilometers. You will agree not to hit Russia with those. NATO already has an understanding. The Ukrainians aren't going to bite the hand that feeds them. But Crimea, yeah, go at it. Crimea is that's why they want that range, to really prep Crimea. So it's a game changer for them.
So let's say that we gave Ukraine everything they needed, and then 7 days from now, they push Russia back, the war's over. In your opinion, what becomes of Ukraine, and are they our friend? Are they our ally now?
Well, we've got a lot of work with Ukraine. So, first of all, we have to convince them that they're an ally. Right now, they're ambivalent. They are 100% sure of UK support because they understand what UK is giving them meets their requirements. You see what I'm saying? We've got to take an intelligent approach that actually will save us money, cause less resources, and convince the Ukrainians that we are truly an ally. But we have to. It's a minor risk. The risk is, what is the risk? Inciting Putin? Come on. But it means a more circumspect, focused approach. What do you need? Specifically, what do you need? What do you need to do to the Russians that we can help you with? Not simply, here's another $37.4 billion. It's the Norwegians providing the NASAMS anti-air defense system, and the Germans with the RSK. And the French with the Caesar self-propelled artillery. They are, at least, we can criticize them all, but they are at least saying to the Ukrainians, what do you need, and answering that request. We, United States, are not. Well, you must need this. Oh, we've got all this shit here. I think you need this.
Right.
Yeah. And the Ukrainians know, really? And, honestly, though, I mean, got to be honest, the Ukrainians, I'm like, what are you going to use all this shit for, the 113s? And they're telling me, well, right now we use our own personal vehicles to take guys to the front line. So now at least we have a better, but why not give them something that's really fucking worthwhile? Yeah.
It's fascinating, and like we appreciate, because for me, like, this is one of the first, well, it's the second firsthand account that we've had on the show, I think, right? But it didn't go this much into depth.
It's the best. What he means is it's the best first-hand account from a guy whose approaches are more sophisticated and debonair
and cultured. Yeah, cultured. Exactly. I mean,
checks out.
Yeah,
you're British, of course.
I know. I want to ask you the way to the restroom, but I remember last time we did that with Jack, he was gone for an hour.
I can help you.
I know. I don't want you to help me, Jack.
I'm going to come over here. I'm going to get a little personal. I'm going to unplug your microphone for you.
No, actually, I don't need to go net.
Oh.
Yeah. Sit down. Yeah.
It's
Jesus, Andrew.
Yeah.
No,
Get me
it's
all
okay.
spun up for nothing.
I know, but he said he has a, what are those bags called?
The, like the catheters? Like a catheter bag?
What are they called?
You want a Gatorade bottle to piss into?
Yeah, it's fine.
A Lefroy bottle?
Yeah.
So, why the Mozart group? Like, you sound like a string quartet.
I did not like that. I did not like the title, actually. We were trying to think. So as this stuff was happening in Kiev in March, we realized that we had a cadre of trainers full-time, and we realized that we had donor funding coming in, so we wanted to sustain our efforts as long as possible, and that's how, we realized we needed to be a thing, an entity.
Right.
And so someone came up with the idea of the Mozart group, and it caught on before I had a say, and that's fine.
So are you all learning to play instruments now in case a performance is requested?
No, I mean, honestly, the reason why I wasn't happy with the term was because we are nothing like the Mozart group, right? When I know in the end I have to accept we're a private military company, but we're an ethical private military company.
So
why Jack's laughing.
So the Mozart group, there's a history of the name?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Yeah, so some dude came up with a name, and it stuck, and everyone started using it, and then, branding's a big thing, right?
Yeah. No, it really is. And
So all of your listeners absolutely have to subscribe to our merch store, right?
The link is in the description. But for people who are listening and not watching, where can they find that your website?
It's in the show notes too in the audio.
Oh, it is? Okay.
He's awesome.
Damn, dude.
I know.
He makes the
I know.
show
You
the show.
think you can trip me up? I've got D.
Because you don't know your website?
He's like, shut the fuck up, David.
Why don't you hit up some questions from
the
folks out there?
And I'm just kidding about the string quartet thing. Like, it's a good name. It's like a nefarious name. If you guys grow and take over the world, it'll be like the Mozart group.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you think cannabis will be legalized in New York?
It is.
It is, man.
Oh, really?
Have you been out on the street lately?
Really? I'm a big fan, actually, now.
Of cannabis?
Yeah.
Jack isn't too adverse to it either.
Not as adverse as I used to be, especially on trips to Las Vegas.
No, I mean, I think it's a very positive thing.
Yeah, I do too. It's not great for me. Like, I don't get a whole bunch out of it, but I'm not opposed to it. There's, I think that it's a great thing to be legal.
Well,
so you're a pot smoking hippie now after all those years in the Marines?
Yeah, 100%.
You need to grow your hair out and have a ponytail.
No.
Hawaiian shirt.
But I think THC has positive aspects.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, really does. I mean, I don't... microdosing is the term. It's very difficult to microdose now because you build up a tolerance very quickly. So you've got to be circumspect about it. You can't simply keep taking THC and you have to keep taking more and more. I mean, it's ultimately not going to have a good effect on your body. So what I'm told, and these are MARSOC guys now who run it's called the Hellman Growing Company. So you microdose, right? You work out. Jack, so tomorrow you wake up, you got your little bag of gummy bears that you went to Gifted Curators here in, wherever in New York.
That I got from Woodstock.
Yeah. And you take, what do you take? 5 grams, 5 milligrams?
Yeah,
10
5
milligrams?
is like
Yeah.
more than enough for me.
Yeah, with your coffee, right? And it makes you feel good, focused, you're not scattered, you have energy. But learning how to sustain that, because you always give up something, right? You always lose something.
Right.
If you're getting something.
Right.
So how do you sustain that? And then you have to, every third day, stop for 48 hours or whatever. Or 4th day. Anyway, the point is, though, what does it get you? It gets you, unlike what we used to think from high school, because we're forgetting shit all the time because we overdid it. It gets you super focused. It gets you energy. Gets you a very positive outlook without all the downsides of alcohol, right?
Yeah. I haven't had that experience with it, and I know other people do, and I know that it's a great
But
treatment
you have
for
to look at it
post-traumatic stress.
scientifically. You have to go to a, I don't know, pot administrator. I don't know, pot dispenser. No, I'm being serious. No, Dave, because what you do is you roll up and you're like, you bogart the pong, and then you get the munchies, and you're like, that sucked.
And watch
But-
Game of Thrones. What's wrong with that?
But
I mean, what is wrong with that?
anyway, I think there's a better experience in store for you.
I hope so. Like there are other things that I've tried that have given me a I don't want to say a euphoric feeling, that have sort of increased that barrier between the I don't want to say post-traumatic stress or whatever.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
the
Instantly.
the tension, yeah.
Yeah.
But
Like what? Like what?
honestly, MDMA.
Really?
Yeah, not like ecstasy, not with like amphetamines in it, just like MDMA, like creates that level. THC actually, no matter what type I take, it generally makes me feel even more like, it makes me feel heavy, but
Yeah.
more alert.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Interesting.
and not alert in a good way.
Really?
Yeah,
MDMA.
yeah.
MDMA is what though? For the benefit of your listeners, because of course, Jack knows.
It's commonly called ecstasy.
Well, I think it's ecstasy when it has the amphetamine in it, and it's Molly when it's not. D, help me out here.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Oh, it's you guys. Well, thank
You can tell I'm part of
yeah.
the square community.
And that just, for me, that creates a very relaxed, sort of euphoric feeling that
And you get
that
this here
produces
in
it.
New York?
Well, not now, not with all the fentanyl that's getting mixed in with all
Really?
the drugs. Yeah, I mean, they just had like 3 people in New York. Well, 3 people that were important enough to report on. Let me say
Yeah.
that, because people are dying all the time. But from like fentanyl in their cocaine, it's getting mixed in a lot of stuff.
Oh,
like,
wow.
it's not really safe to do anything here right now.
Yeah.
Well, anything that you don't know where it's coming from. But and then ketamine, I had a really good effect with when I used that. And I know that they're using that in a lot of the post-traumatic programs.
Yeah,
too.
I haven't used any of that. Just THC, and generally positive, because I don't go overboard with that.
Do you find that it helps you? And I don't want to say relax, because that seems like such a casual term, but like decompress.
Yeah, it really does. But strangely enough, it helps me concentrate too.
Interesting.
But I take very small, I'm not like after a buzz. I take relatively small doses, so I work out what affects me, and then I take smaller doses than that, and then I'll break for 48 hours.
Yeah.
You say that now. The next time we have you on, your 4th appearance on the show, you're gonna have like a little sandwich baggie full of pills.
That could be right.
Well,
yeah.
Take a
I-
hit
But
of this, kid.
but,
I mean,
in the end, I think I'm probably going to pay a price.
No, not for microdosing THC.
No, Jack, I'm being serious though. I'm probably we all pay a price for what we've gone through, right? So
yeah.
you try and minimize the cost. And so I would say, yeah, any self-medication, probably not good. But on balance, THC...
It's not bad.
It's not
fine.
bad. And it's given me probably a better feeling than...
Yeah. It's
I
not
don't like... you
I mean,
know,
it's a way better
it's
solution.
Great, yeah.
Than,
I mean, it's great getting lick it up with you guys.
Yeah,
It's
right.
great.
But
I
you
know,
don't want to do that every day.
right.
yeah, I know I'm not. I know I can walk home to my hotel. I'm not going to get ass raped by you guys. And, despite Dave's threats, but hey, it's
Threats? What threats?
No, those aren't.
But
those
generally,
are
I mean, it's like,
those are
I
sweet
mean,
nothings.
It's good experience because I'm with friends, but you
Don't threaten me with a good time.
Yeah, you don't want to, you don't want to get liquored up too often. But same thing with anything. I mean, THC included, because it does, too much alters. I mean, it makes me sleep very well. A lot of positive aspects, but I recognize too. Why would I want to be in an altered state?
When we had Jim Morris on the show, who was a captain in Special Forces captain in Vietnam. He talked to us about his experiences before any of the stuff we're talking about was even known.
Yeah,
he was messing around with LSD.
Really?
As a way to try to like get out of that box that he was in.
Yeah.
And
Very interesting.
and he used it and had a mostly positive experience with it. But I remember him telling us it got to a certain point. I took everything I had and flushed it down the toilet. Like it was starting to get to that point where it was taking over my life. Right?
Yeah. Well, we've had Sam on. She went through
the medical way of
program
doing
for with mushrooms.
Yeah.
I think ayahuasca.
We've had people on who have done the stellate ganglion blocks.
Yeah.
There's just, it's very interesting because not before any of this was studied, but after it was studied and then shelved by the government, and then you have the post-Vietnam era, and you have all these veterans coming out, turning to marijuana. We talked to my buddy Mike. He was on the show, and he went to India and like spent a winter in a cave doing opium with a sadhu, with a guru, and they were all sort of looking for something.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think that it's to escape the world. I think it's to sort of reconnect with the world.
I think it's to make sense of the world. Right? Yeah. It's a really good, and I think, frankly, I think that's all positive. I mean, I'm an addictive. I know I have an addictive personality, and but I would frankly, the experimentation I've done with THC leaves me feeling far better than anything with alcohol. And I've come to learn. Okay, too much is not good because you lose sense of where you are in memory and all that. But how many? I mean, you guys as former leaders, how many guys do you have to bail out of jail who caused fights because they were high from marijuana?
Right.
Can't think of any.
Yeah. It
doesn't. Yeah.
It's strange that it became
alcohol is behind so many bad things that happen.
Yeah.
Marijuana. Yeah, not so much.
Reefer madness.
Yeah,
reefer,
absolutely.
I know. Yeah, you don't get that, right?
No.
Reefer rage.
I actually have reefer madness.
All right, let's hit up
which
some
is a movie
questions
from
here.
like the 50s
the
or
50s,
60s.
yeah.
All right, so let's see here. Danny, thank you very much. Did Andrew or any other Ukrainians he trained encounter any members of Putin's private mercenaries known as the Wagner Group?
Yeah. So we've always missed the Wagner Group, fortunately. They have been reported to break through, Ukrainian lines in Donbass regularly and attack checkpoints or checkpoint attack groups trying to, get through. But no, we haven't come into direct contact with him. Oh, what is that?
This is Buffalo Trace.
Okay.
Ian, thank you very much. Question for the group. I've seen lots of Ukrainians Ukrainian field interrogations of Russian soldiers. No abuse of prisoners, but video online. Is this okay under the Hague? Are there prescriptions against filming POWs?
Yes, there are, and the Ukrainians are in violation of the Hague Convention. There is a, I forget the exact phraseology, but it is, we looked at this closely, and it's they should be no filming of the phrase, the terminology is bringing attention, blah 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 blah, to media, and yes, the Ukrainians are violating that. Absolutely. They're filming of a number of things that they're doing with POWs is violating law of armed conflict, and it's not obvious. It's not like the Ukrainians are intentionally saying, "Hey, fuck you, we're gonna." But there is an educational aspect of this that the United States probably needs to get involved in, saying, "Hey, guys, we understand you mean well, but these things are not palatable. You cannot do these things." Filming interrogations is one of them.
Yeah.
And filming interrogations and then posting them on, even if you have the permission of the guy being interrogated, everyone knows we don't do that.
Is that a challenge with working with what we could call like partisan forces, right? Is it?
I think it's a challenge, very clearly a challenge with the nature of this war, the bitterness. You can say any war has bitterness, but this particular war has a tremendous amount of anger, bitterness between the Russians and the Ukrainians. There is no, you just have to look at the rhetoric. There's no common ground. There's just absolute hatred and anger. So my point here is, a good friend of mine is a NATO lawyer. He's like the SES level lawyers and head of their review of law of armed conflict, blah, blah, blah. And he said, "Hey, NATO wants me to come into country. Can I embed with you guys? And I can teach classes of Ukrainians on law of armed conflict." And at me, as an American, I'm like, yeah, that sounds pretty cool. And then I was thinking about it, it's like, Butch, that is the worst fucking possible thing.
Right.
So we're not providing them with ATACMs, we're not giving them this, that, but we're bringing a dude in. We can't bring anyone else to train them on anything in the country.
Right.
But bring a dude on telling them now, "Hey, we're going to teach you about the law of armed conflict."
Right.
They could go, "Fuck you." We've got Russians raping people and pillaging our villages, and this is the only support you want to provide us, is telling us be nice to them.
Right.
I'm paraphrasing.
Right.
Of course I believe in the law of armed conflict.
Of course. But it's not necessarily when you have 5 days to train.
We are beyond that, is what I'm saying.
Right.
Is we as US trainers absolutely will distance ourselves as soon as anyone shows us a video of killing Russians prisoners. We're like, okay, that you have just fucking disqualified you and your whole unit for us being a touch point.
Yeah.
And we've been showing those videos plenty of times. So
Yeah.
my point is, it's a very, very dirty war, and the Ukrainians are committing plenty of violations of law of armed conflict, and we need to not accept what they're doing,
Right.
but call that out.
Right.
But the way to do it isn't say, "Hey guys, we can't give you any other training."
Right.
Javelin training.
We have an EO class.
I know,
right now.
javelin
Yeah.
training, but we're going to tell you, you can't, guys.
Right.
Killing Russian prisoners is
Right. And it's interesting because in the past, in you like Latin America or whatever, if U.S. Forces or employees were involved with any force that committed,
Yeah.
war atrocities
You
or
step right
whatever.
back, right?
You have to,
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
done.
Yeah.
But we're obviously not going to pull our support from Ukraine at this
Well,
time.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm saying unit by unit you can do that. And for the most part, I've got to tell you, no, they don't commit atrocities.
Yeah, I don't- yeah.
I mean,
Atrocities is a big
units,
word,
The
yeah.
units that we are working with are very professional in how they,
Yeah.
interrogate Russian prisoners. But
Yeah.
I want people to understand that we, Mozart Group, are there's no question of us going, oh yeah, well, that's the way it is.
Yeah.
It's like, as soon as we see a video of killing prisoners or anything like that, we're like, dudes, we're going to another unit.
Yeah.
And
I need to retract that. Like I said, atrocities, and I was thinking about like the Contras and Sandinistas and stuff. But you're talking about these violations.
it's atrocities. No,
Yeah.
I mean, it still is. I mean, you shouldn't kill dudes who, I mean, everyone knows who surrendered. I mean, and there was plenty of that. There was plenty of that. There's all kinds of atrocities to go around.
I mean, I imagine for a lot of the soldiers, and this doesn't justify it, it just gives you sort of empathy or insight into the situation. I imagine for a lot of the soldiers and a lot of the civilians that it's a very personal war.
Hugely, yeah. So, Dave, think about the risk calculus. So think about what you and me and Jack, when we deployed, our personal risk calculus, right? I don't know. I mean, I can't speak for you. And I never really sorted it out for myself. But I knew I wanted generally to survive. But I didn't want to appear as a chicken, as a coward. I didn't particularly want... I knew I wasn't going to get a medal. I wasn't that level of, insane bravery. But you want to do your job, right? You troll along. For the Ukrainians, though, it's a different...
Right.
They got their families behind them.
Right.
And so that risk calculus says, I would die.
Right.
Rather than, I would die and I'm going to take as many of these fuckers with me. And you can understand that, right? You can imagine literally your family is behind you.
Right.
You no longer care about your survival, right?
Right.
Russians
And
aren't
you don't
getting
care
that.
about some concept of the Hague somewhere.
No,
off
it's
somewhere.
like, yeah, it's, I'm going to kill every motherfucker who wants to touch my family. That's
Right.
how personal it becomes.
Right.
And who can blame them?
No.
I mean, it's very difficult as an outsider to, you've got to, but we're very careful not to foster that hatred, not to build on it. We're very careful to emphasize that you're a professional soldier, here's what you do, you take prisoners, blah, blah, blah. We're very, we explain this is all part of the same package, guys. You're professionals, you're soldiers, you don't do shit. If you do, you're just like the Russians.
Right.
Who knows how much of an influence we have on that regard.
Right.
But, we're not blind to that, and we're not Ukrainians. I've done stuff to support the Israelis, and I've gone through the same stuff to my guys. As read the name tape above your pocket. I can't do that now with my guys. We don't have name tapes, but you're not fucking Israelis. You're not Ukrainians. Right. This is about something higher than that. So let's not get too focused on our partners and start forgiving them for stuff that they don't need to be forgetful.
Right. You can still do your job without putting them on some sort of pedestal.
Pedestal, exactly. Right. Yeah. And we need to be cautious about that. And that's what I tell all of us. This isn't about Ukraine and Russia. We're not getting overly sentimental. It's not like, the Spanish Civil War. But maybe it is like the Spanish Civil War, because those guys who went to do, fight the Republicans were essentially saying, hey, this is a threat that is going to encompass the whole world soon.
Right.
And they were prescient,
Yeah.
So maybe it's not a bad analogy. But my point is, it's not about Ukraine. We're not like, I happen to have, Ukraine flag tied to my bag, but I'm not, oh my God, Ukraine's so awesome. No, because I understand. that there are plenty fucked up people running Ukraine. It's not about that. It's about global norms, right?
Right.
It's about Putin. It's like
Right.
allowing dudes in the 21st century like Putin
Right.
to do what they want to do.
It's a just fight.
Yeah, it is.
T-Bar, thank you very much. How should policy balance responding to the Russian invasion with its focus on China? Should the pivot to Asia pause to refocus on European defense?
I don't think we need to pause to refocus. I think bolstering NATO the way you have done. You've heard me. I would like to see more. I would like to see a more wholehearted U.S. support as far as provision of weapons and all that. But in answer to what he says, no, I think by really emphasizing our role here, we're sending a very clear message to the Chinese about Taiwan. And I was in MAR 4-Pack. I was the plans officer for Taiwan, so I'm very familiar with their plan. And there are clear correlations, and I think that's the best way the U.S. can say, hey, China, look what's happened to Russia. They've become an international pariah. But again, it gets back to the fact that the U.S. needs to support Ukraine more wholeheartedly with weapons platforms. And then they can send that message. And I think it's a great message, right?
You're right.
Because China's always kind of edged forward of, so U.S. doesn't care that much, and you're going to have to, by the time we invade, you're going to have to deploy forces forward to basically take the country back. So there's always been this backdrop. I think this is a great opportunity for the United States to say no.
Questions?
Last question. Thank you, Artie. What are you guys' thoughts on the prevalence of commercial drones on the battlefield? Both sides seem to be making good use of them, and how does it affect the soldier Marine psychologically? I mean, I don't have any experience with this, so...
No, it's all important. So drones are a game changer. The U.S. military does not currently recognize this, as far as cultural acceptance at the squad level. They are a game changer in this sense that, this is not a Clausewitzian principle of warfare, but you're always trying to find standoff, right? Mm-hmm. That's, from medieval times, you want to be able to observe your enemy before he can see you, and then you want the ability to kill him before he sees you. And so that is what drones give you. There are the other things that for instance, artillery gives you, if you have these things. The Ukrainians do not have these things. They do not have as I explained, a task organization that involves forward observers, blah, blah, blah. But they do understand drones. They understand how to use them. And so that's why I think those are game changers. And not the DJIs they have. They need to bring in more advanced European and US drones that give them advanced strike and reconnaissance.
The DJI Chinese drones that our federal agencies use, those DJI?
Yeah. So, there are... I understand there are packages to mitigate vulnerabilities. All I've heard is about the vulnerabilities.
Let's see here. George Phillips requested the show be conducted topless. Sorry, George, we didn't see this prior. Otherwise, we would have. Next time.
Recorded what?
Jack
naked?
Conducted topless.
Yeah. Well, Jack, that's typically is,
You guys ever see one of these?
Do you... So, Isaac's other question is, do you think you and Mozart might go to Taiwan next? And
yes, we want to go to Taiwan next because there's a businessman who was offered billions of dollars to train Taiwanese Defense Forces. We can do this.
So let's talk about your profit model, as it were, for your business. Right now, you guys are kind of you're surviving on like charity or donations.
Charity is a horrible term.
Well, I mean donations.
But I'm on that note. I'm passing over my pizza. Yeah, we are. So we right now we are totally crowdsourced. As far as resource.
Crowdsource, not charity.
Yeah.
They got it.
No. I mean, totally. No, you're right.
Yeah.
Donor supported organization. To a point. Yeah, we'd like to break out of that. So we are working a number of other lines of effort that will include revenue. But for the most part, we rely on donations. And you know what? There's no reason why we can't survive on that, right? If people care enough.
No, absolutely. In fact, I'm sorry. I'm posting the link. I know it's down below, but I'm also putting it in the chat. If you guys go to the MozartGroup.com, right? The MozartGroup.com, you can donate. Send $5 for that you would buy a coffee with. 15,
20.
20. If
5,000.
If you're a moneybags and you fly a Ukrainian flag in your profile on social media, send them 100 or 200.
Yeah.
Like get behind it and help these guys out. Also,
or if you want to put Jack on the front line for a period of time.
Russia can't handle that heat.
I know.
That's
200.
10 magazines and 2 MREs.
200,000.
I'll have this sorted out.
That's a true escalation of force right there.
Yeah.
No, the president knows. You got to be careful how you use me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Once you let that guy loose.
The jack signal
It's
goes
very
up.
circumspect.
Yeah.
But I think it's time.
And you guys are also looking for EOD experts, right?
Yeah.
So if you or somebody you know is former EOD,
or just like any trainer with emotional intelligence.
So yeah, any trainer with emotional intelligence. So if you're a drill instructor, then maybe not.
You're excluded.
But reach out to these guys and please, I mean, honestly, help them out. Throw them a few bucks. It's not going to them. They're running the miracle mile, the Mozart mile.
All right, absolutely. And if you want to visit us, seriously, we can work out. Like,
come visit.
Yeah, come and visit.
I think Jack and I should make that plan.
Yeah.
I have actually resisted because I don't really want to be a war tourist over there.
But you're not a war tourist. You're a Mozart executive.
I like the way you phrase that.
No, I mean war tourist. No, we do not do war tourist.
I know you don't, but me going over there.
No, it's fine. No, we're gonna walk it. No, it's gonna be cool. It'll be fine. Ask Katie. Katie organizes all this stuff.
I would have to find some. If there was an important story for me to report on there, I would do it.
How can you say that? It's not an important story. We're the important story. Look at
the Mozart Group. Like write an article.
The Atlantic already covered.
No, but write an article countering the Atlantic.
Yeah.
The Atlantic called you guys mercenaries. How or soldiers of fortune or?
Yeah.
Well, if anyone wants to buy that article,
Men who paid the blood price, whatever it is, I don't know.
So I also want to remind people out there to check out our Patreon. The link's down in the description if you want to get access to these episodes ad-free. Actually, both the video and the audio is going to be ad-free on the Patreon now. So hope you guys will check that out and support the stream. We appreciate it, and that's why we're here. We got a new studio, way cooler. We got D. Things are way more professional than they were in some of Andy's previous appearances on the show.
Yeah, my shirt's still on.
Also, buy Andy's book. You will
Please.
love it. You will love it. I promise.
Yeah.
And throw a few bucks to the Mozart Group. Hook a brother up.
Go to our Twitter page, or it's at Andy Milburn 8. Also on TikTok. No, seriously, we do good things.
They do great things.
So thanks for joining us tonight, guys, and we'll be back on Friday with Daryl Blocker. He was the chief of Africa Division at CIA. Really excited to have him on the show, and we'll see you then. Andrew, thanks again for stopping by.
We love you.
No, it's
Love
awesome,
when you come
man.
in, man.
And it was a great ending, so you're not going to get any more complaints about me taking my shirt off. It's on.
Complaints.
God.
Our revenues are going down after this.
I will get complaints that there's no male frontal nudity on this episode.